Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this online rally to halt the disability benefit cuts. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Trade Union Co-ordinating Group, a campaign and alliance of 11 national trade unions, but also by Arise, a festival ideas. Give me a warm welcome to all of you tonight for joining on this really important event. I'm Martin Kavanagh. I'm the national president of PCS, and also I'll be chairing this evening's event. As you all know, the Welfare Secretary Liz Kendall has announced earlier this year the government intends to make up to £5 billion of cuts to disability benefits and those who are chronically sick. Our members in PCS, include workers in the DWP, know exactly the impact that these cuts, devastating cuts, will have, from both sides of the desk, with more and more of our members now having to claim the very benefits that they administer. And they know firsthand what devastation this will cause to some of the most vulnerable in our communities. This event tonight comes on the eve ahead of Rachel Reeves' spending review statement tomorrow, that she's prepared to see whether or not she's prepared to relax his self-imposed fiscal rules, or whether or not she intends to continue the cuts at the expense of some of the poorest and most vulnerable in our society and in our communities. MPs are likely to be asked to vote on these cuts within the next couple of weeks, literally, before the sham of a consultation has even finished. And I can tell you firsthand that DWP are already implementing their plans as if these cuts are going to go ahead. And we know the pressure, though, is mounting on Keir Starmer. We've seen that just in the last 24 hours with the announcement about the winter fuel payments. And over 150 MPs, we believe, have written to him calling for a rethink of these devastating cuts. We'll be hearing tonight from a number of many of those MPs who've signed that letter, but also from disabled activists and from leading trade unionists as well, on the importance of this campaign, on the importance of solidarity in the face of the austerity attacks and the need to resist the divisive rhetoric. During the event, I would urge you please to let us know where you are tuning in from in the Q&A section, and also to keep an eye out for the links from our event volunteers, including how you can donate and to the running costs of today's event. It's important that we get to hear from all of our speakers, so I am going to ask our speakers to limit their contributions to around 4 minutes. And we intend to finish the event tonight around about the 7:45 mark. To kick off, our first speaker is going to be Tony O'Reilly. Tony is one of the best and most brilliant activists in disabled people against the cuts over a number of years. And I had a great pleasure of spending time with Tony in Geneva earlier last year in our efforts to try and get the UN to listen to, at the time, to try and defend off the attacks from the Tory government. Sadly, here we are under a Labour government facing exactly the same conditions and attacks. So Tony, a very warm welcome over to you, comrade.
Oh, thank you, comrade. Thank you, Martin. I'm here. I'm speaking on behalf of disabled people against the cuts. My colleague and comrade Ellen Clifford couldn't be here, an unexpected emergency, so she's asked me to stand in on her behalf. And just in case I forget, in the middle of my presentation, can I thank the trade union movement and all of the MPs who are standing with disabled people against these cuts and this madness that this government is entertaining. I would like to take this opportunity to make clear that we don't know the full extent of these cuts. Neither do the MPs. We know it will impact at least 1.5 million disabled people. We know it will impact those on the highest rate of disability benefits and those on the standard rate. And we know that it will push thousands and thousands of us into poverty and destitution. We also know it will cost human lives. That is nothing new. Previous reforms from the previous government have also cost lives, thanks to the courage and bravery of Ellen Clifford, who got the last white paper overthrown, and the work of our allies in the trade union movement and others. We were able to stop that. We're now at this stage again where we have to challenge these breaches of our human rights. You know, Martin said about Geneva, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Committee said that the previous reforms were a grave and systemic violation of our human rights as human beings, and they were unnecessary. Now we're going into cuts that are even worse and far more severe. They're attacking people with invisible disabilities, our young people, people with mental health issues, and saying that they are not entitled to support, much needed support that we need as disabled people. This is absolutely inhumane and cruel. Without the trade union movement, without those MPs standing with us and giving us their unqualified support, I don't know where this campaign would be. But together and at events like this, you give us hope that we can overturn these cuts, we can overturn these proposals, and we can ask a human rights lawyer, a man who claimed to be a human rights lawyer, the Prime Minister, to overturn these awful decisions. I thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to us and for working with us and engaging with us on these cuts. Just to give you one final point, they say this is all about economic growth. Well, 517 billion retail sales, we make up 250 billion retail sales. Half of those sales disabled people and their families make up. The government spends £37 billion annually to manage poverty. How is doing this going to save the economy or grow the economy? I don't know what the Chancellor's sums are, but her sums do not make sense. This is a political choice, not an economic decision. These decisions will not help the economy, and they certainly won't help the thousands of disabled people who are stressed and full of anxiety every moment of the day, waiting for the executioner's block. But you give us hope, and thank you for attending this rally, and thank you for everything that you're doing for us and for all disabled people throughout the United Kingdom.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Tony, for those words. I mean, clearly that the fight is very much on, in a bit truer sense of the word. I know from speaking from yourself or with yourself and other DPAC comrades, then that there is a real worry and concern and fear, not just of the impact on disabled people, but also of the long-term impact it's going to have on your community, your communities as well, comrade. And I know the work that you'll continue to do. We stand with you absolutely shoulder to shoulder and always will. So solidarity, comrade, and look forward to working with you to make sure we do defeat these cuts. Okay, then we're going to move on now then to our next speaker, and I'm going to introduce somebody who probably needs no introduction, but John McDonnell, MP. John has served as the MP for Hayes and Harlington in West London since 1997 and was an inspiration to many when he was shadow of a Chancellor of the Exchequer, effectively determining the argument that actually there is a different narrative than austerity first time round. John is also the chair of our own PCS's parliamentary group, and he's always been a fantastic supporter of my union. So John, warm welcome, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Look, I want to throw some numbers at people. I apologise for that, but I just want to set the scene because other speakers will be concentrating on other issues. The spending review statement tomorrow basically is the government setting out its expenditure plans for all the different government departments for the next 3 years. You'll hear big numbers, particularly about capital expenditure, but almost certainly big numbers around what will be invested in health and in education. But behind that, and I have this rubric about budgets and spending reviews, the bigger the applause on the day, the bigger the disappointment at the weekend. I think you'll find the hidden figures of individual cuts in departments will come out over the next few days as well. All that really just masks the big issues that we're facing that Tony set out there, because as Martin said, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be asked as MPs to vote for the disability cuts, the cuts in disability benefits to so many people. As Martin said, the government was started looking for 5 billion. Actually, it's now looks as though it's 7 billion. The government said this will impoverish another 250,000 people, 50,000 children, 150,000 carers will lose their benefits. We now know the figure is 350,000. Now, we've been through this before under the Tories when they came for disability benefits, and particularly the work capability assessment. It's like the personal independent payments assessment. We now know as a result of the detailed research, at least 600 people died as a result of DWP actions. Many of them, tragically, were suicides. The other issue that they'll be masking as well is their refusal to budge on the two-child limit. We've now got 4.3 million children living in poverty, 1 million of them in deep poverty, destitution basically. And the two-child limit basically means that about 1.6 million children are affected in it. If we scrapped it, we could lift nearly 500,000 children out of poverty virtually overnight. What I'm worried about is the poverty level figures overall. And again, we now know from the government's own figures that over 14 million people living in poverty, and we know there's 1.9 million pensioners. And if you look at the statistics, basically, it's really for 20 years now, we've never seen a really prolonged fall in poverty in our country. And we have to ask the questions, why is that happening? And it's because we have such grotesque levels of inequality within our society. I'll just throw a few stats at you. Read it on the Equality Trust, the spirit level, the work that Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett has been doing over the years. The top 20% in our country own 36% of the income and 63% of the wealth. The bottom 20%, 8% of the income and 0.5% of the wealth, less than 1% of the wealth. And that's become even a greater disparity in recent years. And it's as a result of the way that our economy is managed. And what's happened is, you can understand it, people are alienated. We have a divided society, and that opens up the opportunities for the far right reform, not to blame the system, but to scapegoat some particular group. And this time, the people they're scapegoating are asylum seekers. Our problem is about the unfair distribution of wealth and income in our society, but also about the unfair distribution of power. So what do we want Labour to do? Well, in the debate tomorrow, what we need to do is insert into that debate some reality of what could be done as an alternative. There's no need for cuts in disability benefits. There's no need for a two-child cap, and there's no need for anyone in our country to live in poverty. And what we expect Labour to do is to act like a Labour government. And the way you tackle that is you redistribute income and wealth and power. I'll just give you some examples, really. All we're asking for is a fair taxation system. For example, make sure the rich and the corporations pay their taxes. The government has admitted already that 40 billion is not paid as a result of tax avoidance or tax evasion. Make the corporations pay their way. Make capital gains taxed at the same level as ordinary people's income. Make sure that we raise corporation taxes because they've had cut after cut in the past, but also tax allowances allocated to them. But in addition to that, I want to particularly highlight today what we call carried interest. This is the profits that private equity company has made. The government promised us that they would tackle this and make sure that these equity companies were taxed fairly and pay their amount of tax to contribute towards our society. This week they've dropped those plans, and it's extraordinary. Others have argued for a wealth tax, and whenever we put that up, they say, well, what will happen is billionaires will leave the country and all this sort of thing. Well, my view is, well, if they want to leave, fine. Well, let's introduce a withdrawal, a goodbye tax of maybe 10 or 20% of their wealth. But one of the things that we could introduce is land value tax, and they can't take the land with them. So what we need now is a Labour government that changes course, no longer accepts there has to be any form of austerity, but with a fair tax and distribution system, we can afford the public services that we need and also lift people out of poverty. Solidarity.
Okay, brilliant, John. Thanks very much again for outlining, that there actually is another narrative on this, and there are other things that can do rather than the political choice that successive governments now have chosen, which is to always look in the pockets of the most vulnerable and the poorest in our community. So thank you very much for your ongoing support, comrade, and I know every one of us tonight very much appreciates that. Okay, before we move on to our next speaker, I mentioned in my opening remarks that obviously events such as tonight do indeed cost money, but also as well, it's important that we have an understanding for why we host these types of events. So I'm just going to now introduce Ben Hayes, who is a volunteer for OReilly. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm here to do this meeting's equivalent of an advert break, but I can assure you it'll be both important and very brief. Rise is co-hosting this rally in association with the Trade Union Co-ordinating Group, which I think all the unions represented on the panel this evening are affiliated to, and it's great to see so many people here for such an important campaign. Now, even doing virtual events such as this, as Martin's just said, does cost significant money in terms of using streaming platforms and things like that. So if you're able and would like to contribute towards the cost, there should be a link being posted in the chat as I speak, where you can do that. All support is very much appreciated, and to borrow a slogan, every little helps. Thanks very much again for coming, and looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Ben. So please, if you can afford to make any donation, please click on the link in the chat function and please donate if you can. As I say, that these are really important. These are important donations because they allow us to continue this ongoing campaign and activity. Okay, just to let comrades know that unfortunately, Zara Sultana has sent her apologies tonight. Zara is unwell. Would have wanted to be here and was desperate to be here to address tonight's event, but isn't able to do so. I'm sure everyone on the meeting sends our best for a speedy recovery. But we are going to move on now to our next speaker, which is Steve Withered, an MP. Steve is a Labour MP, elected as Labour MP for Montgomeryshire and Glendower in 2024, and was part of the new intake of MPs. With the cuts planned by the UK government set to disproportionately impact the lives of people in Wales, it's great that Steve's prepared to speak out and certainly has been speaking out on this issue. Steve, warm welcome over to you, comrade.
Thank you. It's a real honour to be here today, standing alongside comrades as a representative for Wales. Now, let's be clear. Wales already has the highest poverty rates among disabled people in the UK. And now the government's Pathway to Work Green Paper poses a further and significant threat to over 275,000 personal independence payment PIP recipients in Wales and around 110,000 people on universal credit. These proposals will hit Wales particularly hard. But this isn't just about individual hardship. The knock-on effects will put an additional strain on local authorities, health boards, and our vital charitable organisations. The Welsh economy is projected to lose an estimated £470 million every year as a result. Before becoming an MP, I spent over 20 years as a teacher in 4 different border local authorities. I saw firsthand the impact of deep poverty on children's lives. These proposed cuts risk pushing even more children deeper into that cycle. We have a preventative duty. We must invest in social security to lift children out of poverty, not plunge them further into it. And let me be clear, I will vote against these PIP cuts. The government must abandon current plans to withdraw disability-related benefits, genuinely involve disabled people in the design and delivery of any future reforms, provide transparency on how these changes will affect Wales, especially given our devolved responsibilities, and reform the system so it actually supports disabled people and those living with long-term health conditions. These proposals will only deepen hardship and entrench inequality in Wales and across the UK. What we need urgently is a welfare system that supports people when they need it most, not one that punishes them or drives them into further poverty and destitution. Yes, the voices in Parliament speaking out on these issues may be few, but this event is a testament. They are loud, clear and mighty. Diolch yn fawr.
Brilliant, Steve. And again, thank you so much for that contribution. Clearly, the impact is going to have a devastating impact on the communities in Wales disproportionately. So, as I said in the opening remarks, and I think that the importance of your voice cannot go under, cannot be underestimated. And again, out on behalf of PCS, I want to thank you, comrade, for the work that you do on behalf of the PCS Parliamentary Group with solidarity. Okay, comrades, we're going to move on to our next speaker now, and it gives me really great pleasure to introduce our very own PCS terms, Angela Grant. Angela is the Group President for DWP within PCS, representing members in the Department for Work and Pensions, and is also a member of the PCS National Executive Committee, and has been at the forefront of the union's response not only to these benefit cuts, but for a better and fairer social security system. So, Angela, warm welcome over to you.
Thank you, Mart, and thanks for for inviting PCS along to speak as the the department, as the trade union that delivers, whose members deliver welfare, and again, nobody fares well from welfare, do they? And benefit, where nobody fares well from benefit. But as the department that delivers that, the trade union that delivers that, it is, really welcome. We really welcome the invitation to come along. I'll begin by giving our heartfelt solidarity to everybody that is feeling the struggle and feeling fear and apprehension from what is coming down the road. And, as Martin has said, we have got many members. DWP employs people with disabilities. We are a disability confident employer. So, hundreds, thousands of our members are in receipt of benefit and in receipt of PIP, because PIP helps them to stay in work, and they will also be facing the cuts that are to come. So it really is a class issue for us. There is a them and us, and it is not PCS members and disabled people. It is the rich. It is the 1%. It is unfortunately now a Labour government and the working class. And that is where we have found ourselves. We expected at least some socialism from a Labour Party, didn't we? But for, the few MPs that are standing with us, we are not hearing what we wanted to hear from this Labour government. So where do I begin? It is absolutely huge for our members, all of the changes that are to come. Successive governments have linked employment support with social security provision, and that is what we are seeing here. We are seeing social security and employment being linked together. That's where sanctions come from, because it is all about, wanting to take away, rather than support, wanting to take away money from the most vulnerable in society. We are seeing real punitive measures right across our department. 20 years of legislative change that has put the most vulnerable in our society in living in poverty. We look at, what is happening with children in poverty. There are so many things that I can talk about, but I am going to try and can sort of stick to those that are on the healthcare, as DWP call it, the healthcare journey, because it is that healthcare journey where we will be seeing the most punitive cuts that are coming in. So mental health, I'm just going to give a quick example of what happens in our department. When we see cuts to payments for those that are struggling with their mental health, where do they present? They present at our job centres. And there's been we have so many what they call fast track incidents in DWP, where people that need support in their frustration will present at the job centre. And just recently, just one example, we have a dossier that will be presented to our parliamentary group and to the minister, a dossier of what they call fast track incidents, and they are serious incidents. And one of those has just come up this morning in my emails, and what it said was a woman has presented at a job centre. She is crying out for help. She is saying that she is hearing voices in her head, and she said, I am afraid that I am about to slit somebody's throat. I haven't got any money, and this is where I am. That woman, when she was said, she was in that job centre for over an hour. The police came, the police arrested her. She did not need to be arrested. She needed to be, the government are talking about investing in care services, in healthcare. That woman has now been moved into the criminal justice system where she should not be. And this is what is going to happen to all of our, all of those that should be receiving support. So she was in that job centre for over an hour, and then she was arrested. She was found to have a homemade blade on her that was over 20 centimetres long. This is somebody that is coming to a job centre, not because she wants to kill people. She's presenting because she does not have any money. So when we see the white paper, the Pathways to Work, the Pathways to Work green paper, with the cuts to PIP, the cuts to those that are suffering with their mental health, young people under 22 that will no longer have a payment when they are struggling with their mental health. Because what Alison McGovern and what, the ministers, Alison McGovern, Liz Kendall, what they are saying is, if we cut people's money, it will force them into work. That is pretty much what they are telling us. And it is not acceptable that they are wanting to punish. Almost 3 million people will lose PIP. Almost 3 million. I can see Martin's on already, and I've already gone over my time, I'm running to time. But we have seen so many people that are already struggling. This paper that is being introduced is not going to help anybody. We need to see those socialist policies. We have already seen the Department for Work and Pension move. Although they talk about work coach empowerment and increasing, they say they will increase work coach empowerment. Again, today we have found that they are cutting interview times already. How is cutting interview times helping people to get back into work? It is not. So there's a lot for us to talk about, but obviously I've got about 15 pages that I could get through here. But what I will say is that we need to stay together. We need to be having meetings such as this. We need more time to be talking as well. So let's have hour-long, day-long meetings. But this is about us standing, isn't it, in solidarity together, making sure that we are protecting the most vulnerable in our communities. And I can promise you that PCS stand right behind. We are demanding to know how many people have died because of government cuts. They tell us they don't have the figures. Of course, they have the figures. We will continue to press to find out all of the information we can, and to work with all of you to make sure that we do start getting some changes from this government. We've seen the move, haven't we, on the winter fuel allowance. We've seen the move on that. That is people power. That shows what we can do if we keep putting the pressure on. I'll leave that there. Thanks, Mart.
Okay, thanks very much, Angela. Again, really important, to let everyone know that, this PCS do not see this as an us and them in terms of people who claim benefit, people who use our services. Our members are those same people as well, and we are absolutely quite rightly with everyone here tonight, step by step and side by side, and will continue to be so. And thank you for the work that you and the DPAC group continue to do to try and put pressure inside as well in terms of the ministers. So thank you very much for that contribution. Okay then, comrades, we are going to move on now to our next speaker, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Diane Abbott, MP. Diane is the Labour MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, having been the first black woman to be elected in Parliament in 1987. And Diane is also the longest serving female MP and therefore the mother of Parliament. Diane is an absolute stalwart in our movement, and Diane, gives me great pleasure to open the floor to you.
You're on mute as well, Mart. You're on mute, Diane.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just saying that I'm really pleased and proud to speak at this meeting, and it couldn't be more timely because it's the day before Rachel Reeves stands up and talks about her spending review. And the first thing to say is, whatever the Labour Party leadership says, this is an austerity budget. It is an austerity budget. It is an austerity plan. And in many ways, it's worse than George Osborne's austerity, because when you look at the winter fuel tax, when that was suggested to George Osborne, he turned it down. He said it would cause too many problems, but for some reason, we couldn't foresee the problems it would cause. And now the leadership, and Rachel Reeves in particular, have had to do a U-turn. But had they listened to party members, had they listened to ordinary trade unionists, had they listened to the left, it's a mistake they would not have made. So this is about austerity, and we do have to fight it because the consequences for ordinary people will be cataclysmic. They say they're spending more money on the NHS, but there's still a huge shortage of finance for the NHS. They're putting money, I think, into hospitals, but not into the day-to-day running of the NHS. But if you look at schools, they're going to lose money. If you look at policing, they're going to lose money. If you look at local authorities, they are going to lose money. And ordinary people, ordinary party supporters are going to suffer as never before. And, you know, they have said, well, they didn't actually say they made a mistake, but they've walked back what they did on winter fuel, but they're going to have bad, worse consequences for what they're doing with this spending review. So it's important to have meetings like this. It's important to support each other. It's important to support for trade unionists, grassroots trade unionists, and grassroots activists to come together, because I think only if we resist this government, only if we say that you've got money for defense and weapons, that you haven't got money for welfare, only if we make our opposition clear and consistent can the leadership be defeated. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, brilliant, Diane. Thank you very much for those, really important words, because absolutely the unity is key in this. We can't win and stop this government in its tracks unless we all unite and continue to join forces. So thank you very much for your contribution tonight. Okay then, comrades, we are going to move on then to our next speaker, and before I do, just going to say, just keep your messages coming, and please just remember to let us know who you are and where you're dialing from. The messages are in the Q&A session at the bottom, really are important and make this a real interactive event. So thank you for the ones posted so far, and please keep them coming. And so we're now going to move on to Cathy Bole. Cathy is the chair of Disability Labour, and who has used their own experience of the system that has been so bad that she has spoken of being left with recurring PTSD every time the DWP contacts me. Cathy is an absolute avid activist and campaigner, and a warm welcome to you, Cathy. Over to you.
Thank you, Martin. I wish I had a different message from those that have gone before me, and they've probably spoken much more eloquently than I will. But I've used myself as an example to talk to MPs and anybody who will listen, because people who are disabled, particularly, are terrified. We have been mentally tortured as a group of people since George Osborne and the Tories came in then. We're told that, we have people shopping disabled people to the DWP. There's this whole thing about rumors going around that, the DWP is taking videos from Sainsbury's and other supermarkets and shopping them to the DWP to check on what we do and what we're spending on. And that constant mental torture is having such an adverse effect. I mean, my favorite statement is, I never had anxiety until I met the DWP. And I so much had wished that I never had to ask for help. But I thought that when I asked, there would be help for me. And now I feel as though I'm waiting every minute to be tortured. We worked hard leading up to the Labour government coming in to thinking that maybe the pain would stop. How wrong we were. And right out the gate, vulnerable people were the target of spending cuts. It is so important that we stand together. There's more of us than there is of them. And every activist organization, trade unions, the whole 9 yards, we have to stand together and tell this government that we are not going to stand for this anymore, and that we are going to stand unafraid together, because a lot of what goes on is meant to scare us. The thing that scares me, though, is if we don't get some of this stuff reversed, we will lose so many more vulnerable people with mental ill health. I'm a trained mental health first aider, and there isn't an hour in a day where I'm not talking to somebody who has a problem with their mental health. Mental health provision isn't out there. There isn't enough help out there for people who have mental health conditions. And this is only making it worse. And I think we need to let Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and all the rest of them know that we're not going to back down until they change course on this, because we're not going to stand for torture of vulnerable people. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing, well, we're the party of work. Some people can't work. That's just a fact. And I'm sorry I'm shouting, I really shouldn't do, but it just makes me so angry, because that just deteriorates this self-image of disabled people, the fact that they can't work. And I don't know how many times in a speech Keir Starmer will say, we are the party of working people. We are the party of all people, not working people. And we need to protect those people who are under threat. And I'd like to remind the leadership that when I was counselor, I had to sign a code of conduct that told me that I needed to protect the vulnerable in society, that we had a safeguarding responsibility. And now I'm saying to them, they have a safeguarding responsibility. And if people die because of policies being put forth, then by God, they need to be held accountable. Thank you, Martin. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy, for that, really powerful but very strong message. And also a reminder about the values that any government, but especially a Labour government, really should be espousing rather than the ones that they are right now. So thank you very much for your contribution. Okay then, comrades, we're going to move on now to our next speaker, who is Brian Leishman MP. Brian has been a Labour MP for Allowett and Grangemouth since 2024 and has been one of the most outspoken of the new intake. Brian, that's somebody else has written that for me, right? That's not an accusation from me, but he has been one of the most outspoken of the new intake of MPs and is also a member of the Socialist Campaign Group. Over to you, Brian. Warm welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, comrades, because there's no doubt about it that this is a pivotal moment for disabled people, but it's also a pivotal moment for the Labour Party, this particular Labour government, and also all of our country, because the last decade and a half saw not only inequality grow at an absolutely incredible pace. We saw Britain, the fifth largest economy in the world, become a country with millions of our people relying on food banks. Pensioners right through to children descending into poverty, all so the very wealthiest could get tax breaks. And these tax breaks, but at the same time, the most disadvantaged and vulnerable people in the country were hammered by austerity. The cuts to welfare, the cuts to our NHS, the cuts to the public services that bind us together and are the very fabric of our society. So it's absolutely no wonder at all that people are both exhausted and demoralised. And in a Scottish context, we have seen both governments, the Tories in London and the SNP in Edinburgh, enact brutal catalogues of cuts that has led to deprivation that we thought, quite frankly, was consigned to history books. The sort of political decisions that make people poor by design. And last July, people from all across the UK voted for all of that suffering to end. They were offered change from Labour. Now, no one from any part of the country thought that after 14 years of criminal Tory austerity, of punitive welfare policies that robbed people of their dignity and committed violations of human rights against disabled people, that the change that they voted for would be billions of pounds cut from the welfare budget. People clearly voted for something else. An end to cruel Tory welfare policies that led to more disabled people living in poverty than ever before. Again, to reiterate, in one of the richest countries in the world. And comrades, the need to build an equal and fairer society is greater now than at any point. Because as well as savage austerity, we have seen a global pandemic where inequality has grown, and then a cost of living crisis where the cost of essentials, that's food, shelter, heat, have all risen. And as we all know, that the cost of living crisis is still ongoing for millions. Not at the rate that it was, but people's living standards are still deteriorating. And people often talk about the cost of living, but the cost of disability is expensive, whether that be for care bills or food for special dietary requirements or electricity for added heating or for charging mobility scooters or dehumidifiers or any manner of medical equipment that needs electricity. It is expensive. And for many, that means a horrible choice of going without something essential that they need. Now, that's not the way that life should be, not for anyone in Britain. And this Labour government should be building a caring, compassionate society where the Department of Work and Pensions is there to support people, to help people, not punish them. What we need to do in government is we need to work with disability organisations and charities to design a new system that treats people with dignity and respect. That is how we ensure a standard of living to properly end poverty in this country. And that is the true values of a Labour government, and what myself, the MPs, my comrades at this rally, and what grassroots Labour members from all over the UK, that's the country that we want to build. So the last thing I would say is that you have our support, you always do. We're in Parliament for you, and solidarity, not just in this struggle, but in all the struggles that collectively we face together.
Thanks very much, Brian. Not only for that message, solidarity at the end there, but actually quite rightly also highlighting, the need. It's not just enough to say what is not good enough. We also have to give an alternative, and I'm supporting and working with those who both use and indeed implement the services are going to be critical to that if we're ever going to have a social security system that is fit for purpose. So thank you so much, comrade, for all that you continue to do, and will continue to do it in the weeks and months ahead. Okay, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, who is Ramona McCartney. Ramona is a campaigner and activist from People's Assembly Against Austerity, and was absolutely a driving force behind a brilliant weekend that we just had, where we saw tens of thousands of people take to the streets in London and march on Whitehall, demanding an end to austerity, but also a demand for welfare, not warfare. So really warm welcome over to you, Ramona.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thanks to Arise and TUCG for inviting the People's Assembly here this evening. I mean, when I think about the People's Assembly, we launched in 2013 around the coalition government, and it was one of the biggest launches of a campaign, really, where we brought campaigners, trade unionists, activists, you know, trying to join up all the dots, really, so that we could have a really fair fight at austerity. And at the time, the word austerity was not really a household name. It wasn't really used that much. And it was funny, in 2013, and the 22nd of June, the 2 days after that, was the most Googled word, austerity. Funny that, isn't it? And now we're so used to it. But what we weren't used to, we had 14 or more years of crippling Tory austerity. And then when we saw a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, this Labour government coming in, we thought, okay, there should be restoration put in place for all of the wrongs that were done over those years. But instead of that, they come running in and attack the very people that they should have been protecting. And isn't it such a shame that the People's Assembly have to come back on the streets? We have to rebirth the anti-austerity movement like we just did on Saturday. We brought, as Martin just said, we brought tens of thousands of people out on the streets, and most of those people are just ordinary people, campaign organisers, activists. We had NHS, we had housing activists, we had health, homes, jobs, education, all of those things that are so vital to every one of us in all of our communities had to come out in the streets to stand up against a Labour government. This is not where we should be. But as Angela Grant spoke before, and Cathy Bole both mentioned, that this is a people-powered movement. It has to be. It has to come from us. We are very grateful for our anti-austerity MPs that come out to fight and represent and, you know, do their best in Parliament, but it's not all about parliamentary politics. We sometimes have to take things into our own hands, and that's what we have to do right now by creating this movement. The movement's there, the infrastructure's there, we just have to revive it. And that was the starting point on Saturday. On Saturday, we saw all of those people come out. The People's Assembly have got hundreds of groups all over the country, which are now actually becoming active all of a sudden, because we will take this fight on. And what we have to do is that we have to drag the Labour Party back to the left where it belongs. And we will do everything that we have to do. We will call out everything they do, every step of the way. We will call it from the rooftops. We will tell them when they're wrong, and we will get people all over the country joining in and doing that. So what I would be appealing to anybody listening to this evening is, if you're not part of the People's Assembly, find a local group, get involved. If there's no local group, start a local group, because we will not stop until not just 1, 2, 3 U-turns. We want it turned around, and we want the Labour Party back where it belongs. And these people have hijacked it. They either leave or we have to find a new alternative. So that's a warning shot from us on Saturday, is that this is the start of something. We're not going away, and we'll continue to fight austerity until it is over. So thank you for everybody listening tonight, and I hope you all can join one of your People's Assembly local groups. And not only will we be building our local groups, and we'll be holding events in towns and cities all over the country, we will also be outside the Labour Party conference come September in our tens of thousands. So if I don't see you before then, I'll see you there. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, thanks very much, Ramona. And again, just on behalf of everyone here tonight, can I just thank you for the work that you put in to make Saturday such a success. But you're right, it has got to be the start. That can't be just a one-off demonstration. And I know certainly that from the People's Assembly perspective, that is not going to be. So there's real energy and vibrancy about Saturday, and we need to build on that. And events like tonight clearly are all about doing just that. So thank you very much again for your contribution. Okay then, comrades, we're going to move on then to our next speaker now. And just before we do, just really a shout out to the Trade Union Coordinating Group. TUCG is made up of 11 national trade unions of like-minded unions who basically get together to try and come up with not only policy, but actually campaigning ideas and try and coordinate their activity. It's a really important part of our movement, and a really important part of the trade union movement. And a big shout out to the TUCG and all of those, including Solidarity Consultant for the work that they do in pulling all that together. So thank you very much for everything that you do on behalf of the trade union movement. Okay, we're going to move on now then to Steve Wright. Steve became the General Secretary of the Fire Brigade Union earlier this year. and has publicly described the disability cuts as shameful and demanded that the leadership conducts a U-turn. Clearly, we saw a partial U-turn to a degree in terms of the winter fuel payments yesterday. But Steve, really is an honour to have you here, comrade, and the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Martin. Look, a pleasure to be here, and I'll echo what every other speaker has said. Look, these devastating attack on disabled workers and our class, and I think that's what we need to understand. This is an attack on our class, on the working class, and I'm proud to be a voice in opposing that. And I think the trade unions need to and will do play an important part in that, and the TUCG will pull some of that together. But look, I want to reflect a little bit as a firefighter for the last 25 years that we have involvement within our communities with disabled workers, with the most vulnerable in society, not just from the incidents that we attend to assist and help people, but in the wider work that we do in our communities, about prevention work, about fitting smoke detectors in people's houses and other elements and other things to help people in communities. And what I've witnessed over the years, over these austerity years, is the impact that these cuts, such as these disability cuts, have had on the most vulnerable in society. And we've seen it firsthand, real life scenarios playing out in front of us. And I think that's why firefighters are so passionate, and our union is so passionate about standing up and defending the rights of the most vulnerable in society. And we'll continue to do that. So the FBU stands in solidarity with all workers. And I think it's important to recognise that this is not a division of workers and disabled people, and this rhetoric that they want you to hear, that if they pay workers that they can't pay any payments to disabled people. Well, look, this is a lie, and we need to call it out. And I'm proud that I've called it out. I'm proud that our union continues to call that out. And we've done some work recently. We attended the TUC, the Disabled Workers Conference, and look, I heard firsthand from people about the suffering that they have faced, and that is only going to get worse if these cuts are pushed through. And there's an affiliated trade union of Labour. We will make sure our voice is heard in any forum that we're able to speak in on behalf of those workers. And the stories that came out from that conference of workers, disabled workers, reliance on these PIP payments, having to prove their disability time and time again, it's heartbreaking actually, and it's unacceptable. And many other speakers have covered that a Labour government is pushing through these devastating cuts. And look, we know that these cuts, the worst disability benefit cuts on record, 5 billion cuts, will devastate living standards, they devastate people's independence. But benefits are there to support people to get into work. And that this is driving them deeper and deeper into poverty. And I often use the phrase of that it's not just a cost of living, it's the cost of survival for some people out there. And look, I think the trade unions need to play an important part in that. So look, this is a class issue, Martin, as I know you've recognised and other speakers have recognised. This is an attack on our class. And look, we wait and see what is said tomorrow, but we know what is coming down the line, exactly what Diane said, that this is another return to austerity, that we have seen the impact as firefighters on the front line, what that actually means in real life scenarios. So that we stand in solidarity. Fantastic meeting tonight. Great to hear the other speakers. And then let's keep fighting, let's keep coordinating and make sure that we change the narrative that is out there from this Labour government. We'll continue to do that and hold their feet to the fire on these outrageous decisions that they continue to take. But look, solidarity from the Fire Brigades Union. And thanks for the opportunity to join tonight. Thanks, Martin.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks very much, comrade. Not only for the really important words that you're given there, but also as well for your unions, being so vocal on the cuts. I mean, it's not that long ago, is it? Anything to do with social security was something that the trade union movement, as per se, moved away from and went away from, and it was just something that seemed to be an issue for PCS and our members. Well, that has changed significantly over the recent years, and your union is one of the more vocal. So, comrade, thank you for everything that you continue to say and do. I look forward to working with you in this campaign. Cheers, mate. Okay, then, we are going to move now to our next speaker then, and that is Ian Byrne. Ian is a Labour MP for Liverpool West Derby and is a formidable campaigner. Ian's promotion of the case for a right to food has been instrumental in highlighting the impacts of food poverty across the UK, but also has been a very outspoken against the welfare cuts and poverty pay that have led to drive so much of the demand for the use of food banks. So, Ian, warm welcome over to you, comrade.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks for everybody on the call, and also everyone from Arise and the trade union group for organising this. And apologies for lateness, we've just been in the Gaza statement. Look, I'm going to touch on what happened in West Derby about 2 months ago now, 6 weeks ago, and we held a citizens' assembly in West Derby the week when the Green Paper was announced of the government's plans to slash disability support, and it was quite a horrific meeting, to be honest. Room was rammed, dozens and dozens of disabled people attended, and the fear within the room was palpable. One disabled man said to me, MPs are voting to assist my suicide while voting to stop me from being able to live. Now, there is words, not mine, but that was echoed right throughout that room, and it was really, really powerful that it was coming from disabled people who were absolutely terrified of what was actually going to happen under the Labour government. At the end of the meeting, we had a vote on the proposed cuts, and I think it was 60 to 0. It was overwhelming. Every single person in the room voted against them. So I think it's important to repeat what I said in a recent debate in Parliament, and just like my good friend John McDonald, who spoke on this and said about the Tory cuts a decade ago, if he had to, I would swim to vomit to vote against these cuts, and that's exactly how I feel, and many others in the Labour Party feel. And I think it's been spoken about. I haven't heard all the contributions so far, but I'm sure everybody's talked about the scale. The scale is terrifying, overwhelming. Biggest cuts to welfare in a fiscal event since 2015, which has come from the Institute of Fiscal Studies. 150,000 carers. The numbers pile up and are absolutely terrifying. The cuts to health payments within universal credit, we see 3 million people losing out. As a constituency MP, I cannot put into words the scale of the absolute devastation this will have on disabled people in my community, on top of what they've been through over the last 14 years of austerity, cost of living crisis, COVID. It's absolutely overwhelming what they're facing and what we're potentially going to implement further on them. Liverpool West Derby will be one of the hardest hit constituencies in the country. As Martin outlined, we've been doing lots and lots of work about tackling food poverty since I've been elected since 2019, tackling inequality, tackling poverty. Under the Tories, we were pushing back, but this is a Labour government. And their own analysis has said that 250,000 people will be driven into poverty, including 50,000 children. I mean, it's hard to comprehend that we're actually having this discussion and having this debate. This week, the Social Trust estimated the cuts will force nearly 500,000 people to turn to food banks. Let's be honest, it's not just the government's disability cuts that are wrong. It's been everything that we've seen, from keeping the two-child benefit cap to means testing winter fuel payments, from arming Israel's genocide in Gaza to copying Reform's demonisation of migrants. The government is making wrong choices and wrong priorities, and it's up to us to try and change their minds, push them back, make them understand, save themselves from themselves. In fact, I was elected on a promise of change, and this is not the change people voted for. So let me promise you this tonight, comrades. I and my parliamentary colleagues on this call tonight, and many others hopefully within Parliament, will continue to stand up for real Labour values that resonate across the country, real Labour values that are popular, real Labour values, what we expect from a Labour government with a huge majority and a huge mandate for change. We will continue to speak out for all the working class and all our diversity. We will champion human rights abroad and socialism at home. And we will do absolutely everything we can to defeat these cruel cuts to disability support and deliver the change our country desperately needs. Because this isn't it. This must be challenged. We must fight back against this over the next four weeks. Solidarity to you all, comrades, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian, again for all that you do and continue to do. Certainly, you know, your work on the Right for Food has been inspirational. I'm sure many on the call would agree with that tonight, comrade. But you also have tapped into actually pretty much everything that is driving the narrative right now, and it's all going in the wrong direction, is it? And of course, it is inflaming the narrative in our communities, which is seeing a right wing in Bole as well. So, but thank you for everything you continue to do, comrade. Again, you know, same as all the other speakers tonight. We look forward to working with you to make sure that a successful campaign and we end these benefit cuts. So solidarity. Okay, we're going to move on now to our next speaker. Our next speaker was elected as MP for Poole in 2024, and Neil Duncan-Jordan has helped lead the successful fight back against the scrapping of the winter fuel payments. Neil has also been hosting a whole range of briefings and also seminars with disabled people's groups, charities and other experts in Parliament to try and help inform MPs about the likely impacts of the proposed cuts to disability benefits, many of which you've heard tonight. But Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Martin, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight. I want to start by just paying tribute to everybody who's campaigned on this issue since it was announced in the Green Paper. Everybody who's written to their MP, everybody who's marched, everybody who's lobbied and so on and so forth. Because I want to just pick up on something that Brian Leachman said earlier. This is a key defining moment of what sort of government this is going to be. If they get this wrong, it will define the government for the rest of the term of the 5 years, in my view. That's how significant this vote will be. So there's a lot at stake, I think. Now, the proposed changes affect over 3 million people. We've heard that today, and Ian's just mentioned those figures. 350,000 people are going to be pushed into poverty who aren't in poverty now, including at least 100,000 children, and on top of that, 150,000 carers who are looking after somebody who, if they lose their PIP, then they will lose their carers allowance. But even before we start looking at those figures, there are currently 700,000 disabled people who are already living in poverty. So they're going to be pushed even further into hardship. They're already there, and they're going to be pushed further down as a result of these changes. Now, the proposals that we're being faced with are based on a lot of half-truths and some smoke and mirrors. And I just want to unpick some of those so that people get to understand the arguments that government are using and the counter-arguments that we need to scale up with. The scale of the cuts is not 5 billion. It's much higher than that. It's at least 6.7 billion by the end of the parliamentary term. And more than that, the government have not made any assessment as to the cost additionally to the NHS when people can't get the support through PIP and universal credit, on social care, and of course the impact on lower consumer spending, because if disabled people haven't got their benefits, they're not spending them locally. Now that's an economic impact. None of those things have been assessed as to the real cost. So the cost of these cuts is way more than 6.7 billion. It's nearer probably to 10. And what's been said already is absolutely correct. This is the biggest cut to welfare since George Osborne's austerity agenda in 2010. And it's quite clearly and nakedly an attack on working class people. Now, the government argue that 1 in 10 will be affected. That figure's not correct. They don't count in that figure future claimants. So they can easily argue that future claimants don't figure at all, but future claimants are definitely going to be people who lose out. The government believe that people will get better at filling in the forms, and therefore 1 in 10 will be losing out rather than 1 in 6 or 1 in 3, which is a more accurate assessment. Now, we know that the benefit system is complex. People find it difficult to make a claim, and there's very little assistance out there for them to do so. So to argue that suddenly there's going to be an army of new claimants, it's absolutely nonsense. The truth is that PIP is an underclaimed benefit. And you don't often hear the government talk about this. Less than half of the disabled people that are eligible to make a claim don't make a claim. So there's a load of PIP money out there unclaimed that should be going to people who need it. And the increases in the number of claims, I hear the minister say, oh, there's been a massive increase in the number of claims. And they sort of argue that that's because social media is driving people to make claims that are bogus. The reality is people are making claims for 2 reasons. One, because they're getting less healthy and their illnesses are more severe. And 2, austerity is kicking in and the cost of living and they can't afford to live. So they're making claims now to get benefits. And we know, and this has been said earlier, that being disabled is more costly. You do have to spend more money. And we also know that benefits are far from generous. We need to ensure that that is changed. That's why I think we need to stop the green paper. We need to redesign the benefit system in conjunction with those people and groups that are affected. We need co-production of a better benefit system that works for people, is more supportive and is more generous. And we need to genuinely invest in getting people back to work if they want to. Now, what the government is suggesting is that they spend, at the end of the 5 years, £1.4 billion to get people back into work. Now, the estimates that I've got about the number of people that would benefit from that money is somewhere between 45,000 and 95,000. So you've got 3 million people that are going to affect. A small proportion of those, if they're lucky, will find employment through the government's employment scheme. And what disabled people tell me is that it's not the schemes that are lacking, it's the discrimination that they face in the workplace, it's the barriers that employers put up when they go to find a job. That's what's got to be tackled. We need to have better laws outlawing discrimination, more protections for workers, including the rights to flexible working and so on. It's not that people don't want to work, those who can, it's that the suitable jobs are not there and the support in the workplace is not there. And that's a role for trade unions as well as Labour MPs to take up. I'm going to finish on this, Martin. Now, look, the winter fuel U-turn shows, I think, that pressure works. That's the first thing to take away. It also shows that governments make mistakes. And this is another mistake that they are making. And it also shows that we need to keep on campaigning, because cuts don't bring jobs to disabled people. Cuts just bring more pain and austerity. So we need to build the movement and we need to oppose the green paper in all its forms. Thanks very much, comrades.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Neil, for that. A really important message, and the detail, some of the detail you went into there in relation to the very real impacts that these cuts would have, but also actually the importance, as a number of speakers have said tonight, on giving an alternative narrative. It's not just a good enough to oppose these cuts. We've actually got to say that there is a different way, and it's very much an affordable way. So thank you very much for everything you continue to do, comrade. Okay, we're going to move on now to our next speaker, and that is Mads Wainman. Mads is the Disabled Students Officer for Labour students and has a background in disability and mental health activism. Mads, over to you. Warm welcome.
Hello, thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm Mads, and I'm the Disabled Students Officer for Labour students, alongside one of the vice chairs for the Socialist Health Association. I'm very grateful to be invited here, and I'd like to thank all the people and volunteers who've made this possible, as well as thank you all for your solidarity. I'd like to just give a brief content warning for mental health, self-harm and suicide for my speech, so please do take care of yourself. And as this event shows, you're not alone. Disabled people are at the forefront of austerity cuts. We're the first group to feel its impact in our healthcare, our community initiatives and our households. Further cuts on the back of decades-long austerity is evidently inhumane. The repeated rhetoric around bringing disabled people back into work is incredibly ableist. Disabled people want to be employed, but rising unemployment and inaccessible workplaces are the real barrier to this, not welfare benefits. We are not lazy. We're just trying our hardest to function in a society that is built against us, and PIP payments are the bare minimum in facilitating that. I've written previously through Labour Outlook about this rhetoric in relation to mental health and the absolutely unthinkable decision that West Streeting made to put employment advisors in mental health hospitals. This is aimed heavily at young people who are hospitalised at rising rates in comparison to previous generations due to a number of factors. None of these factors include being overdiagnosed or being unable to understand the job-seeking process. As we all know, it's repeated austerity measures that have created a crumbling healthcare service and a failing education system. Teachers often say that schools are an additional emergency service, as young people are presenting to them with incredibly complex and difficult mental health issues that should have been given help so much earlier. We're seeing people as young as 13 being regularly admitted to hospital for suicide attempts because our communities are just on their knees. In addition to this damaging rhetoric and the horrific cuts to PIP, there are proposed changes to disabled students' allowance that are going to hugely impact the ability for disabled people to access higher education. As so many people have pointed out, having disabled people foot the bill instead of big corporations and billionaires is not only cruel, but it is a bad economic policy that will have a knock-on impact for generations when hundreds of people are unable to get their education and a career and are instead dependent on the state. It is important to remember that whilst all of this is happening, there are discussions about the state helping disabled people to commit suicide. These cuts and assisted suicide legislation goes hand in hand, and the rise in self-inflicted injuries and death cast a dark shadow over the future impact of such legislation. But despite these recurring and damaging policies, disabled people are still here. We won't go away, and we are so resilient. The solidarity I see here gives me so much hope, and the loving community of disabled people who continually give solidarity to so many issues will continually show up for each other. This is a dark time, but we know that we will get through it. We need more, and we deserve more, but we are demanding more, and we will get more. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mads, for that. Again, you know, important, really important narrative, important words that you've given there. And thank you again for reminding everybody that this isn't just about the here and now. This is also about trying to, you know, future-proof our social security system and making sure that people with disabilities are treated with respect and dignity from here on in and moving forward, which has sadly not been the case so far. So thank you so much for that now. Okay then, comrades, we are going to move on to our next speaker. Just before we do, just let you know that Richard Burgon MP was due to join us tonight and is still going to try or hopeful to get here. But Richard actually is currently making a speech in the House about the sanctions in relation to what's going on in Palestine, and I'm sure comrades will absolutely agree that that is equally is an important issue that we're facing as a movement right now. But without further ado, I am going to introduce Sarah Woolley. Sarah is now in her second term as the General Secretary for the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, and having been elected uncontested last time. And I know that you will all share with me in thanking Sarah for the brilliant work she does on behalf of our movement. She's always at events, she's always at rallies, she's always campaigning and making sure the trade union voice is heard as part of these wider campaigns. So Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Martin, and thank you for those kind words. I'm multitasking this evening. As it happens, I've just tried to find a quiet corner to come to speak. We're here today because each and every one of us on this call refused to stay silent whilst our communities are punished for simply trying to survive. We're here because we've got a government, a Labour government, shamefully, that wants to make more cuts to disability benefits, knowing full well the devastation that causes. And I think, you know, I can speak on behalf of us all to say that we're saying enough is enough and we want better. Cutting disability benefits is not about saving money. It's about making our class pay for a crisis that we did not cause. It's about forcing people, disabled people, sick people, people already living in poverty, to choose between eating and heating, and in some cases, many cases, isolating them from their communities even further. And that's all a political choice. And let's be clear, there's no shortage of money in this country. When there needs to be money, it is found. What there is, though, is a shortage of justice. The billionaires have seen their wealth balloon, whilst food bank use has skyrocketed. Corporations are raking in obscene profits, whilst families skip meals and pensioners sit in the cold. This is not a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of greed crisis. And our disabled friends and community members are at the sharp end of that point. You know, I'm going to touch on our work around the right to food as part of my contribution, because I think that's an important aspect as well of what we're talking about tonight. But when we talk about real action against poverty, it means doing more than, you know, tinkering around the edges. It means taxing the rich fairly, consistently and without apology. It means closing tax loopholes and making the wealthiest pay their share so that everyone else can live in dignity. We've got to have a social security system that does what it says on the tin, provides security. And that means raising benefits, not slashing them. It means recognising the added cost disabled people face, not punishing them for needing that support. And it means tackling things like food poverty head on. Because right now, as we sit in here, too many people are stuck in jobs that don't pay enough to live on. Too many are in homes that cost too much to heat. And too many are having the impossible, having to make the impossible choice between putting food on the table and turning the heating on. Now, I appreciate it's been quite warm today, so maybe not today, but generally we are making, and people are having to make really difficult decisions. And we have to be clear, you know, for our members, access to decent, nutritious, affordable food is a human right for everyone. It's not a privilege, not a reward for working a certain number of hours. It's a right, and we cannot call ourselves a fair society whilst millions go hungry, and millions more if these cuts to disability benefits come into play, or cold, or both. We've got to have investment in public services. We've got to see real wage increases. We need rent controls. We need a food system that feeds people, not profit margins, and a benefits system that provides support to those who need it. And we need policies built on justice, not cruelty. It's not about charity, it's about solidarity, and it's about demanding a government that works for the many, not that answers to millionaires. So this evening, we've got to say no more cuts. We've got to say no more excuses. We don't want any more crumbs. We want justice, we want dignity, we want food on the table, heat in our homes, the ability to survive in dignity and thrive more than survive, and a future that we can all believe in. And seeing so many people on this call tonight shows just how much will there is, and that coming together, that's absolutely what we can achieve. Thank you ever so much, Martin.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sarah. And that really important message that this is not and never has been about asking for charity for people. This is actually about treating people with dignity, respect, and humanity. You know, the bare minimum that we should expect any government to treat, you know, its citizens. And thank you for the work that you continue to do and your union continues to do as well, comrades. So thank you very much for that. Okay, comrades, I'm really pleased to say that Richard has managed to sort of literally sprint probably from the house to get here tonight and has timed it to perfection. Richard obviously has served as Labour MP for Leeds East since 2015 and is secretary to the Socialist Campaign Group of MPs and is a powerful advocate for those fighting for justice and no more so than on this issue. So Richard, warm welcome, over to you.
Very much, Martin. I've just come from the House of Commons chamber where we were talking about sanctions on Israeli ministers, and I and others were arguing that whilst this is a step forward, the government needs to go much further on that. It's good to be with you all. Good to hear from Sarah. Good to see Diane Abbott and other colleagues on the call. And I know that you've all been speaking about the fundamental importance of fighting back against the disability benefit cuts. As I've said on a number of occasions in the House of Commons chamber, on the media and at protests, it's morally indefensible to seek to balance the books on the backs of the poor and the disabled, to decide to take an average of £12 a day from those who are really struggling. And let's be clear about this. Under the Tories' current abhorrent welfare system that we inherited, somebody who needs assistance to cut up their food and needs assistance to wash themselves and needs assistance to dress themselves, under the Tories' rotten welfare system, they would get a personal independence payment. Under Labour's new reformed system, as is proposed, they wouldn't necessarily get that personal independence payment, making things worse, even worse, for some of the poorest people in our society. So it's completely wrong. So rather than try and balance the books on the backs of the disabled, why doesn't the government instead do what we're all suggesting and tax extreme wealth instead? The government's aiming to save between £4 and £5 billion a year by taking money away from people who need assistance to cut up their own food, by taking money away from people who need assistance to wash themselves, by taking money away from people who need assistance to dress themselves. £4 or £5 billion saving, whereas a wealth tax of just 2% on assets over £10 million would raise £24 billion a year. That's the
moral choice. That's the Labour choice. As Harold Wilson said, the Labour Party is a moral crusade, or it's nothing. And I think the government needs to be clear that if they push forward with this plan, with these cuts as proposed, they will face the mother of all rebellions in Parliament, but also in the constituencies in relation to that. So I've been pushing a petition online that calls for a tax on extreme wealth, a tax that I've just described, rather than disability welfare cuts. Almost 70,000 people already signed it. If you haven't signed it, look on my social media and find the link, and please do sign it and share it. I know that some people aren't fans of petitions, but petitions have an honourable history in the British labour and trade union movement and around the world. But the purpose of this petition is that I'm going to present it in Parliament ahead of any vote on disability benefit cuts. Why? In order to remind MPs in there of what people think outside here, to remind MPs of the importance of voting against disability benefit cuts, because they're immoral and unnecessary and un-Labour, and there is a better way forward. A wealth tax is a popular move. 2/3 of people in a poll this month said they're in favour of an annual wealth tax for estates above £10 million, and a similar number backed a windfall tax on banks. New figures show a staggering 150% surge in the wealth of UK billionaires since 2010. In 2010, the combined wealth of UK billionaires was £250 billion. Today, in 2025, the combined wealth of UK billionaires is £620 billion. And I'll finish on this. This week, the government had to make a kind of U-turn on the windfall tax. Now, they're going to be in that same position in relation to disability benefit cuts if they don't listen to socialist MPs, if they don't listen to disabled people, most importantly, if they don't listen to their constituents. They're going to be there. They're going to be having to do a humiliating U-turn in the future on this, as it weighs heavily, I should imagine, on their consciences as they look at the human cost of taking money from the disabled. I think we can win on this. I think we can win on this. And so I just urge people to contact their MPs, even if you believe your MP will always vote with the whip, regardless of the consequence. Contact your MP, because who knows, an MP who's going to plan to vote with the whip might feel the pressure from their constituents and not vote at all. And that could help do what's necessary in order to defeat this bill, which I and others will be voting against. Keep on going. We support you. We've got a job to do. It's immensely important. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard, so much for that. And I know, that was an incredibly busy, period for you. And thank you so much for literally dashing straight from the chamber to address this important rally tonight, because the message you're given there is absolutely critical, that we keep going. We have to keep going, because these cuts will not only devastate, let's face it, they will create harm, they will create, impoverishment, yes, but they also potentially, sadly, we know, may well kill. And it's just such an important message that we have to keep going and fight with everything we have. So thank you so much. Okay then, comrades, that does therefore draw us to a close tonight. Please continue to read all the posts that have been going in the chat throughout this period, and the various links that are being put in there for the various organisations and campaigns that are ongoing. We've all gathered tonight with one aim and a clear aim, and that is to send a message to this Labour government that we are not going to be silenced, we are not going to be quiet, we are not going to accept these benefit cuts will just be implemented and railroaded through. We will continue to work with all of those MPs, and thank you so much for every MP, every campaigner, activist and disability activist that's there tonight, but also as well every trade unionist that's been on this call tonight, whether speaking or indeed joining us for this event, because it is our movement that can stop these cuts in the tracks. It was our movement that forced that partial U-turn on the winter fuel payment, and it can be our movement that defends and supports those who claim disability benefits and sickness benefits right now, because they need that support, and indeed we have a moral duty to provide it. So thank you so much for all the contributions tonight. Thank you for giving up your time and attending, but a message that you really have heard, hopefully loud and clear. that we can be united on this. And as the late, great Tony Benn once said, if we can find money to kill people, we can find money to help people. Solidarity.